Hello, guys, and welcome to the seventh episode of Creating Magic. Today we sit with the smooth and very cool George McBride. Very happy to have you on the show, George.
It's a pleasure. It's an honour and a pleasure. Glad to be
Likewise,
here.
likewise. So you have actually started doing magic since you were 16, if I am correct.
Yeah, probably a wee bit younger.
Even
I've
younger
al-
than that.
yeah, I was born. I don't mind telling you when I was born. I was born in 1961, so I've always had a kind of inquiring mind. I always liked doing little puzzles and tricks and things like that. My father was in the British Army, so he showed me a lot of stuff in the late sort of mid to late 60s. Things with matchboxes, and I was always quite
Yeah.
intrigued by that. Um, in fact, it
So
was
it
my
was your
dad.
father that actually gave you the magic bug?
Well, he taught me lots of little tricks. Well, I say tricks, puzzles. Really, they weren't really tricks. The one sleight that he actually taught me, he didn't know what it was called. He just showed me this thing, and basically it was the backslip. When
Wow, the
you
backstep.
but it's,
Yeah,
it's really
the
it's really
this thing,
strange.
right?
Yeah. The way he done it, it was very, very coarse. I mean, the way he done it was like he would he would get me to pick this card.
Yeah.
I would replace this, and all he done. You got to remember this was a long time ago. All he done was
Yeah.
this, and then my card was gone. So that was the first slight that. To be honest, I was really young. I didn't even know it was a slight. He never called it a slight. He just showed me how it was done. Um,
Yeah.
and I've kind of obviously I use a similar thing to that, but a bit more finessed now.
I can
But
imagine.
yeah, so he was always showing me things, and the one with the matchbox where you put the sleeve up and the drawer at the side, and then you put your you put your finger here, and you've got to lift it up and place it on top without lifting this finger off the table. I've not got a matchbox or I would do it, but if you can imagine the old style matchbox where you take out the
Yep.
drawer, you place the drawer here, and then you place the sleeve pointing up, and then you put
Okay.
this finger at the end of the drawer, and using these two fingers, you lift up the drawer and place it on top of the sleeve without moving this finger. You can only move your finger backwards and forwards. You cannot lift it off the table. And it's actually more difficult than you think. But once you start doing it, it's quite a knack. So these are the things that I remember way back in the late 60s.
So how did you end up going to Roy Walton's magic shop?
Oh, well, I do remember that. I used to go into Roy's uh, in the early 70s, mid 70s, but I didn't actually, I was just intrigued by the shop then. Um, I didn't actually know that that was Roy Walton behind the counter. Now, it wasn't until 1977. I do remember this quite well because it was the year after Carol Fulvis brought out Self-Working Card Tricks. I think he brought that book out in the original Self-Working Card Tricks in 1976, thereabouts. So I went into Roy's shop and I went in to buy a card magic book, and that's the book that I bought. And I still didn't know that that was Roy Walton behind the counter. And he said to me, "Have you heard of Royal Road, the Royal Road to card magic?" And I said, "No, I hadn't." So I bought Self Working Card Tricks by Carol Fulvis, and then I bought Royal Road. And the one thing Roy told me was, if you're quite serious, just don't skip through the chapters in the Royal Road. Take it very slowly and take it a chapter at a time.
Very nice.
Um, so I did do that. And obviously I got to the glide. I could do the glide. I certainly couldn't do the pass. But what was wonderful was that this man behind the counter could do anything. You just had to name any sleight, and doesn't matter what it was, Roy could do it. So when you were reading something and you weren't quite sure how it should look, then you could quite
That's
often
fascinating.
say to Roy, I'm stuck on this. I think it's called a double lift, but I'm not quite sure what. And Roy would do it, but he wouldn't intimidate you. He'd take you through the
Very
nuances
nice.
of it, yeah. And then he would, see, Roy didn't give any formal lessons, but he sort of nurtured you as you went along. Um,
Very nice.
so
Like improvised mentorship, just on the spot.
yes, and he done that with everyone. There's many magicians went into Roy's at that time. And once I started sort of practicing in earnest, I began to meet other people that come into the shop, namely people like Peter Duffy, Gordon Bruce, and a wonderful magician called Stephen Hamilton, who's no longer with us now, but
Course.
he there is a book published by International Magic in London, and it's the magic of Stephen Hamilton.
So what I'm very curious about is how come you've went to the magic shop all those years without actually buying or learning any magic, and then one day you were like, I'm just gonna start learning magic from now on.
Yeah, I mean, I always, like it was the local library. I mean, I picked up a couple of sort of card magic books in the local library, but obviously you've got to return those books. So books like Hoffman and things like that. Um, and a lot of the stuff, it was all kind of stage stuff and things, but I don't know why, but I just wanted to try card tricks. I liked the idea of having a deck of cards in my pocket, such a small thing, and you can create wonderment just with a small pack of cards. So that was the sort of impetus, if you like, to go into the magic shop, because I knew that there would be magic tricks, and surely there would be books in there as well. Um, so so yeah, it was yeah, that was quite not a turning point, but once I started to sort of learn things from certain books, and I started moving on to other books. I did finish the Royal Road to Card Magic, and I could get through the passing things, but I wanted more. And I always remember trying to read. Once I started getting a wee bit more knowledgeable and a bit more competent in sleight of hand, I always try
Yeah.
to do things in reverse. I always make it difficult for myself. I always work from the most difficult first to the easiest, so to speak. So I know it's
It's so
crazy.
nice.
I mean, when I bought expert at the card table, I mean, honestly, I was trying to learn the SWE shift and the open shift before I could do anything else. And it was just, I'd
No,
say,
it's a very interesting way to go about things. I've always preached this sort of philosophy where if you learn something that's more difficult, it's going to be much easier to learn things that are less difficult than that.
yeah, it's that psychological thing. Well, it's not that you conquer the slight, but at least, as you say, you've tried the hard stuff first. So as you gradually get down to the less difficult, it should become easier. I don't know whether
It
that's
should
just,
be.
it should be. I don't know whether that's a mindset but I remember trying to learn. I mean, it was absolutely hopeless at the time, but I didn't even know what it was, and I used to say to Roy, what is this? What is this? No, the open shift, the SWE shift. And
Yeah.
Roy would just take the deck, right, and he would basically just do that. And you say, but what did you do? He says, no, it's just
What did you do?
it's just a
Slow it
shift.
down.
So it's just a shift. So um, and it's a bit
So
coarse now, but if you so that's the SWE shift, and then it was even the more difficult one was the open shift, which is not a it's I mean it's not an invisible move. You've got to use misdirection or something, or use it as a false cut or something. But I did want to move it. I did want to learn it, you know. So I started sort of practicing like this and do it, do it, and of course, in the genie years and years after that, I thought, well, that's good, that move, and you can do it with the open shift. And it was Jerry Sadowitz that published. It's in Genie anyway, and it's a move you can do where you can produce, a card using the open shift. So you're here, and then you can produce the
So
card,
nice.
all that sort of stuff. Gordon Bruce did a wonderful thing, but again, which is published, where a card comes out like that, when you're doing the SWE shift. That's the wonderful Gordon Bruce. A card comes out.
Ah,
So,
interesting.
all
Yeah.
these types of things, quite difficult moves, but I just I just went the opposite way, started doing the difficult first stuff, difficult stuff
Did
first.
you perform when you started doing magic, like to layman people, or were you more, kept to yourself or just performing for magicians?
Well, I did perform on occasion. I did accept once I start. I mean, I didn't. It took me years before I could go out in front of the public. I mean, it took me 15 years before I would do anything,
Wow.
properly. So I started accepting the odd engagement. Probably early 90s, maybe something like that. Where I would,
Okay.
do weddings, and I still do that now in private parties mainly. Um, but I wanted to make sure that I was at least kind of polished before I started doing stuff, in public.
Yeah.
Uh, that took me ages to do that sort of stuff, and I still, well, still do the odd. I don't see. I was working with I had a full-time job at the time. I was working in the Scottish Railways as an operations
Okay.
manager at the time, so I didn't have a lot of time. I could only do stuff at the weekends.
Ah, okay.
So I can accept more engagements now that I've retired.
Makes more sense.
So
Welcome to retirement. So take
it's not,
us a little bit through what a set would be for you when you're performing, like right now.
you mean commercially? If it was like,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Normally I,
How do you
normally I,
start? How do
I don't,
you go about it? What do you close with? You know?
yeah. So if it's a restaurant, even if it's a wedding, if it's a private party, I do have an opening set. I mean, I do something that's particularly visual, which I do a rope routine. I've got a particular rope routine that I do because that's stand up. It's visual. They can see it. And as soon as you do something that's visual, and they can see that you are, a serious magician. I tend not to open with a card trick, to be honest. Um, and I'll do most of the commercial stuff. Sponge balls, that sort of thing. And I do. I don't know if you're familiar with a trick called the jumping gems.
No. Can you
It's
describe it a bit?
So I don't have it with me, but it's basically a paddle trick, but it's very, very commercial. It's where you have two paddles, and
Okay.
you produce a diamond, and then the diamond begins to jump from one to the other.
Yep.
Then it
I know it. Yep.
multiplies,
Yep.
and then the finale is that it changes to a ruby at the end. For ladies, that's really quite nice. If a lady's wearing an engagement ring or something, many a time I'd reach across and take the diamond, and they would double check to make sure the diamond was still in the ring. You know,
It's very nice.
things like that. But anything that involves the audience, anything that's visual, and of course it's got to be resettable. I mean, anything that if you're working, um,
How has your repertoire changed since when you started performing magic, like over the years?
yeah,
How has it changed?
that's a good question, Buzz. Yeah, it's strange because I was very, very much slight orientated, 10, 15 years ago. Um, and I would use false dealing a lot, and it wouldn't matter. I would use a bottom deal, a second deal, as long as it got me where I wanted to get. But I've found that particularly if you're performing commercially, a lot of the times you don't need heavy core sleight of hand. If you're doing a lecture or something like that, or you're working a close-up competition or something like that. But what I find myself doing now is to try and simplify things.
Okay.
Try and reduce the slights, not too much. I do like sleight of hand, and I think sometimes it's all about the effect, and you've got to try and get to the finale, and it's got to be clear, concise. It's all about clarity for me. It's got to, if there's any element of confusion from A to B, you kind of need to cut back on that. It needs to be real clear, the effect. I find a lot of these. I love a lot of these card routines that are, routine, and, maybe we go on for 10. It's difficult to perform something like that commercially,
Yeah. Very different.
It's,
Maybe if you have a show and people are just watching you perform for like 30, 40 minutes, but
I don't do so much that. It's usually just sort of going round the tables. So it's like cocktail events, going from table to table. So it's small pockets of people, really.
how do you prepare for a gig? Like, do you have a ritual? Do you get nervous ever before a gig?
You always get nervous. You always get apprehensive because you want to do well. And I think that's a natural thing. If you don't have that, I would find that rather strange. But I think it's
Yeah.
like a lot of magicians. Once you get the first trick out the way and you gauge the response from the audience, you know, um, you're well on your way. The nerves, you begin to set. I don't think the nerves go away, but you begin to settle a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and magic's an interesting thing because you can gauge people's persona quite quickly. You know when to
Very
continue.
true.
Yeah, you can gauge personalities, I find, quite quickly, just by even getting a card selected. Sometimes they're a bit reticent. Maybe they don't want to see magic. Maybe, you know, um, when you know when to do one trick and move on or continue on. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you know when you're being appreciated, and you know when you're just filling in, if you like.
You can
But it's not,
instantly feel it
yeah,
on the person's reaction,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
I mean,
So
we do
while
like,
we're still at the segment of performing, what do you do when something goes wrong?
right. When something goes wrong, depends on what it is. I mean, now I'll tell you a situation that happened to me many, many years ago, and this is, the bill tube,
The bell tube.
the
Which one is that?
Bill, bill tube.
No?
Okay, the bill tube is, well, the effect, there's many ways you can use it, but this is one way you borrow, say for example, you borrow a £20 note. The £20 note is signed, it's placed under a handkerchief, and handed to the spectator. And then you basically go into your pocket and you take out what you call a small pocket safe. It's a brass tube, completely sealed and padlocked. They can fully examine it, right? They can't see in it. It's extremely well made prop. And you whip the handkerchief away, the £20 note's gone, and the signed note is inside the padlocked bill tube. Very good effect.
Very good.
Very
Very
good.
good.
Many people have used it. There's many different types of bill tube, but the essence of it is that, and most magicians all know what a bill tube is. I'm not giving anything away. There's a secret bit in it where you can load and then close. So,
Yeah.
but the thing is, once that mechanism is closed, there is no way in to that bill tube without removing the padlock. So,
Oh, I can see where this is going.
so, yeah, yes, it's true story. And so I've done the effect. It was only a small affair. It wasn't on a stage or anything. There was about 4 or 5 people watching. But this guy's £20 note is inside the bill tube, absolutely inside there, and it's signed. So I've taken the bill tube and I went to get the key for the padlock, and I ain't got the key. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I haven't got the key. I can't. I know his signed notes in there, and he won't believe it when I get it out that it's signed in his.
Yeah,
But
of course. He's gotta see it.
I don't get the pat. There's no way you can use the mechanism that you got it in, because that's locked and done. You've got to remove the padlock. Now, honestly, the only thing I had in my pocket was another set of small keys with the wee steel ring that holds the keys.
Okay.
Right, so I took that key out, put the key in, didn't open the padlock. They thought this was part of it, and I bent the metal that was holding the key, and honestly, you won't believe it, but I actually picked the lock. The metal. I picked the lock, and the bar sprung open.
Genius.
They
Oh
thought
my God, genius.
they thought it was part of it, and yeah, I removed it and I put it out onto his palm, and it was a small elastic band on it. He took the elastic band off, and it was signed, and that was the end of the effect. But honestly, I didn't know where I was for a good 2 minutes. True
Oh my
story.
God, that's amazing.
True story.
Who would have ever thought that you would have to pick lock it in front of the spectator?
Yeah, well, I didn't, but I tell you what, I never forgot the key after that.
No, never ever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a true story. Yeah.
So, for everybody watching, what you can learn from George is if something goes wrong, never tell the spectator that what you're doing is like you're trying to fix it. Just pretend like it's completely part of the act until the end.
Yeah, you
Always.
always try and wing it in some way, you know. You try, I think winging it becomes slightly easier when you're more experienced. I mean,
Yes.
if you're less experienced, you're more liable to panic
Yep.
fairly quickly, you know.
Yep.